continue our discussion to the rib cage. So we've already done discussing the thoracic or in the vertebra column. So now let's go on identifying what are those bones that presented in the rib cage. So the rib cage consists of 12 pairs of ribs and the sternum or the breastbone. The three parts of the sternum are the upper manubrium and the central body, and the lower, which is called as xiphoid process. The manubrium is actually the thickest portion of the sternum as it carries the greatest physical load. It is the most superior region of the sternum and articulates with the clavicles or your collarbones. While the xiphoid process, it is the smallest region of the sternum or breastbone. Okay, so that's it. Let's explain this slide. So let's continue with another slide. So this is the picture, the location of each part of rib cage. Okay, nakikita naman from body of sternum to manubrium and to the xiphoid process. Okay, let's go. Yan, ito another illustration on showing the location of each type of rib cage. Okay. All of the ribs articulate posteriorly with the thoracic vertebra. So this is the explanation of the function of each rib cage. The first 7 pairs of the ribs are called true ribs. They articulate directly with the manubrium and body of the sternum by means of costal cartilage. The next 3 pairs are called false ribs. Their cartilages join the 7th rib cartilage, while the last 2 pairs are called floating ribs because they do not articulate with the sternum at all. And with this explanation, the ribs can be classified as true ribs. So, how many ribs in the true ribs? We have 1 to 7 ribs. From 1 to 7 rib in the rib cage, from 1 to 7, yan yung true ribs. While in false ribs, we have 8 to 12. And the last 2 pairs are also known as the floating ribs, which is 11 and 12. As we all know, the rib cage is 12, right? Or the ribs are anchored posteriorly to the 12 thoracic vertebrae. And in that 12 thoracic vertebrae, they can be classified into true, false, and floating ribs. So in true ribs, nandyan si 1-7. From your first rib to 7, it is the true ribs. It is your true ribs. While in 8 to 12, that is your false ribs. While in floating ribs, these are the last 2 pairs or 11 and 12. Okay? So that's it. If you have question clarification, you can leave it to GC. So this is again the representation of the ribs, the location of the true ribs, false ribs, and the floating ribs. Okay? An obvious function of the rib cage is that it encloses and protects the heart and lungs. Keep in mind though that the rib cage also protects organ in the upper abdominal cavity such as liver and spleen. The other important function of the rib cage depend upon its flexibility. The ribs are pulled upward and downward by the external intercostal muscles. This enlarges the chest cavity, which expands the lungs and contributes to inhalation. So that is why our heart and our lungs is protected because of the ribs. That is why even if we twist, we bend, we flex, it's not a problem with regards to the internal organ. Kasi bakit? Nandyan si rib cage. Nakadepende ito sa flexibility ni rib cage. So this statement actually explains the importance and the function of our rib cage. Okay, let's proceed. So like this. While we are inhaling and exhaling, of course, nag-expand po yung si lungs. Bakit hindi man lang, or what is the protection of it? Of course, si rib cage. That is why, na si rib cage, may flexibility rin. Hindi nangyayari na tumitigas lang sa rib cage na nakaprotekta kay lungs. No. Kapag nagmo-move si lungs, nagmo-move din si ribs. Okay? Let's proceed. The shoulder and arm. Okay. So this is actually an illustration or a picture of the different parts and location of the shoulder and arm. So let's proceed. So the shoulder girdles attach the arms to the axial skeleton. Each consists of scapula or the shoulder blade and clavicle or the collarbone. The scapula is a large flat bone with several projections. The spine of the scapula or the coracoid process that anchors some of the muscles that move the upper arm and the forearm. A shallow depression called the glenoid fossa form a ball and socket joint with the humerus, the bone of the upper arm. And the controls or the controls the shoulder and arm, or what controls the shoulder and arm. Eventually, the large shoulder muscles are responsible for most shoulder work. Our deltoid is responsible for flexion and medial rotation of the arm. It is also responsible for abduction, extension, and lateral rotation. So that is actually the explanation why we can move our arm and we can move our shoulder. So by its explanation in this slide, it is very factual, no, that the shoulder can attach the shoulder attached in our arm. So meaning to say, the function of it is within pa rin sa process ng shoulder and arm. So magkaiba man yung function nila from the arm and shoulder, but they are attached. So the two part is attached. So kapag gumagalaw si arm, naggagalaw din si shoulder. Right? Okay, so that is the explanation for this slide. Okay, let's proceed to another slide. So this is the example of the scapula and the clavicle. I know you already know this one because we've already discussed the body parts and function. By the body parts and function, you already know it sa location pa lang nila. Alam na natin from the very beginning of it. Okay, let's proceed. Another picture. This is actually for location, ha. Don't worry. I gave you lang as much as possible many examples. Okay, another. So let's go now on discussing what is clavicle. So each clavicle articulates laterally with the scapula and medially with the manubrium of the sternum. In this position, the clavicles act as a braces for the scapulae and prevent the shoulder from coming too far forward. Although the shoulder joint is capable of a wide range of movement, the shoulder itself must be relatively stable if these movements are to be effective. So meaning to say, when we say clavicle, it is the bone that connects the breastplate or our sternum to the shoulder. It is very solid bone that has a slight S shape and can be easily seen in many people. It connects to the sternum at a joint with cartilage called the sternoclavicular joint. So that is a clavicle. So thus collarbone and clavicle the same. Your collarbone or clavicle is the bone that runs horizontally between the top of your breastbone, sternum, and shoulder blade or the scapula. You feel your collarbone by touching the area between the neck and your shoulder. A broken collarbone, also called as a clavicle fracture, is when the bone breaks. So meaning to say, collarbone and clavicle are the same, while scapula is your shoulder blade. Okay, let's move now to another slide. Let's now discuss what is humerus. So the humerus is the long bone of the upper arm. Distally, the humerus form a hinge joint with the ulna of the forearm. This hinge joint, the elbow permit movement in one plane that is back and forth with no lateral movement. So meaning to say, humerus can contribute the movements of the hand, your elbow, and therefore the function of the upper limb. Okay, so that is the major function of humerus. So that explains the definition of humerus. Always remember that humerus humerus is the arm bone between your shoulder and your elbow, and it contributes to the movement of the hand, elbow, and also your upper limb. Okay, so let's proceed. So this is another picture for humerus. You can also see the location of where does the humerus located. Okay, so let's now discuss what is ulna and radius. The forearm bones are the ulna on the little finger side and the radius on the thumb side. The semilunar notch of the ulna is part of the hinge joint of the elbow. It articulates with the trochlea of the humerus. The radius and ulna articulate proximally to form a pivot joint which permits turning the hand palm up to palm down. So the main function of the radius and ulna is that radius is often thought of as the largest of the two long bones in the forearm because it is thicker than the ulna at the wrist, but the thinner at the elbow. So meaning to say, when we say radius, it is larger than the two long bones, and it is also thicker than the ulna. So radius and ulna pivot around one another to allow rotation of our wrist. Okay? So that is ulna and radius. So this one, as you can see, that's why we can twist our arm. Yan. Because of these two types of bone. Ulna and radius. Yan. Next, we have carpals and metacarpals. The carpals are 8 small bones in the wrist. Gliding joint between them permit a sliding movement, while the metacarpals is the proximal ends, the 5 bones of the palm of our hand. So let's see. So these are the carpals and metacarpals. As you can see, that in the higher part, it is our metacarpals, while in the lower part or in the end of it is our carpals. Okay. So always remember saan ang location ha ng dalawang part of the bone, the carpals and metacarpals. So meaning to say, by its illustration, your carpals is your wrist bone, while your metacarpals is your palm bone. Okay? So let's proceed. So this is eventually another picture of the carpal bone. So all of the joint formed by the carpals and metacarpals make the hand very flexible. At the wrist, try this yourself. Flexion to extension should be almost 180 degrees. But the thumb is more movable than the fingers because of its carpometacarpal joint. Carpometacarpal joint. Okay, what does it mean? When we say carpometacarpal joint, it is the base of the thumb where it meets the hand. Okay, this joint eventually allows the thumb to move freely in many directions. It also provides strength so that your hand can grasp and grip. A smooth tissue called cartilage lines and cushions the bones of the CMC joint or the carpometacarpal joint. So that is why our metacarpals can flex 180 degrees, or our thumb can be moved than the fingers because of its carpometacarpal joints. Nag-allow siya to grasp and grip. May strength si carpometacarpal joint. Okay? So, how about this term? We have saddle joint, which enable the thumb to cross over the palm and permits gripping. That's why we can grip, we can grasp grasp because of saddle joint. Okay? While in the carpometacarpal joint, we can eventually move our thumb than our finger. So, yan. Kaya mas namumove natin si thumb, but the thumb is more movable than the finger because of its carpometacarpal joint. Okay. Um, let's proceed to another slide. So, this is this is the location of carpometacarpal. Yan. Phalanges. Okay. So, if carpals is wrist bone and the palm bone is metacarpals, the finger bone is called as phalanges. Phalanges are the bones of the finger. There are 2 phalanges in each thumb and 3 in each of the fingers. Between phalanges are hinge joints which permit movement in one plane. So this is the location of the phalanges. Kaya nga sinabi natin that phalanges is in the finger bones. Okay? Phalanges to ano na lang para dagdagan. Phalanges can help us manipulate our environment, while the phalanges of the foot help us balance, walk, and run. So that is very important why our finger can move because of the phalanges or the finger bone. Okay? So that's it. That is the end of our discussion for this part. So let's proceed to the last part of the skeletal system.